We have with us today Sharon Sutherland, physical therapist out of Ireland. Sharon has specialized in the field of 24-hour postural care, seating, lying, and standing, pressure care, and mobility since 1988. She offers clinical consultation to individuals needing clinical assessments, healthcare professionals, and manufacturers globally. She also offers clinical mentorship, which is very important, and I'm hearing more and more about people wanting mentors, to clinicians who wish to up their skills in this specialized area of practice. Sharon has given over 2,000 presentations on 24-hour postural care, pressure care, and mobility to audiences including physiotherapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, engineers, physicians, attorneys, nurses, government personnel, and case managers worldwide. With a global reputation as a dynamic and highly energetic instructor, in combination with being a practicing hands-on clinician, Sharon brings enthusiasm and excitement to each situation, whilst instilling best practices and current research every step of the way. And all of that is why we are wanting to talk with you today. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you, Wendy. What an absolute pleasure it is for me to have this opportunity to speak with you about my absolutely favorite topic in the world. Yes, I am so passionate about 24-hour postural care, pressure care, and related functional mobility. That my goal in life is to, transition into my twilight years in this profession by handing on the baton and encouraging and motivating younger upcoming clinicians to carry on with that same torch, that same passionate light for the topic as I've had for the last 30-something years. We won't talk about how many years. This should be indication enough.
Well, our viewers are going to hang on every word because they are looking for all the tips and tools and interventions that they can use to start some of them to start their passion towards this area of expertise. And then for some, they might be seasoned and out a few years and really want to specialize and help people in this way. So we're going to hang on every word. So thank you for being with us. Let's start with how you got into this field.
Well, how I got into it was quite by accident. After leaving Ireland for 1 year to go to Toronto in the very early 80s, I found myself, I thought I was going to work in sports physiotherapy, and found myself being asked one day to do an evaluation for a young man who functioned from a seated position. And his goal was to optimize his function through a new wheelchair and seating prescription. And just let me tell you, I had absolutely no clue where to begin, none. But I decided that rather than try something, and of course I would have looked at him in his existing chair and started right there with assessing him in his chair, I decided instead to contact people who might know something about this topic. So I looked up, wheelchairs and seating in the Greater Toronto area. I found manufacturers, I found suppliers, and I found clinicians in rehab facilities. And I reached out and said, help, I need help. And that was the beginning of the journey. And when I've never stopped, and I've just been on this journey, learning and growing and sharing for the last 35 years.
And I think probably having success early on, knowing that all that research went to the good of that patient or that client probably fueled the fire, I assume.
Oh, 100%. And in fact, so much so that I give up my initial thought of working in sports and that element of physiotherapy, and took it upon myself to realize that if we don't have optimal posture and we don't have a good seating position, that we really can't function. So that sort of became my whole new twist. And without even knowing, I was carving my own way into this world of 24-hour postural care and related functional mobility.
That's great. And found your passion.
Oh, Absolutely.
How did you get into the now educational role? And I know you're still hands-on as well, but you're educating a lot of people across the globe.
Yes. In the late 80s and early 90s, I was provided with the opportunity to work with the Assistive Devices Program, or commonly known as ADP, in the province of Ontario in Canada. And in doing so, it's the funding, so to speak, in the province of Ontario for individuals who need wheelchair seating and mobility related devices. And in that position, I realized that the authorizers, who were those clinicians sort of given permission to or authorized to do the prescriptions, I realized that there was really no or very little training about what it was that they were doing. So I took it upon myself to start to talk about and to go out in the world and put myself in a position of extreme vulnerability, because I was afraid of my life to speak in public, never had done that in my life before, and started to conduct training education programs around who qualifies, how does the clinician do an assessment to determine the qualification, what's the documentation that needs to be submitted, such that we didn't keep getting, as clinicians, because I was an authorizer prior to doing that, requests for more information or for, not enough information provided. So I thought, well, if the government doesn't share with us and share with the clinicians what information is necessary from their viewpoint, then it's just a constant chasing of tails and gathering of more information, when perhaps with some informed education and training, we could make things simpler for everybody, and in the end result, have a speedier decision about funding for the end user, who is the most important person of all. That's how it started.
Exactly. And if our viewers are taking notes, the takeaway from that is you used education for advocacy. And I love that. Yes.
Absolutely. And from there, I moved to Colorado after 10 years in Toronto, moved to Colorado with an opportunity at the time to do clinical education for Rick J, the original founder of J Medical. And my conditions were that I had to remain to be a clinician, that it was critically important that I wasn't biased, that I wasn't a salesperson, not that I have any disrespect for sales, because it's critical, but that I really held on to my clinical hat, my clinical hands, and my clinical opinion. And that provided me with the initial opportunity to travel more places than just within Ontario and Canada, which was my starting point. And from there, I went back into my own business and have been providing clinical education, training, and hands-on work globally to all of the people you mentioned in your introduction. And I continue to do so, and I love it. I was traveling pretty extensively all the way through the early 90s, right through, without much hesitation, 2 children in tow as a single mom. Wow, that was yeah, we can talk about that another day. But that took me all over the globe, right up until the pandemic.
Now, early on, was there one defining moment or just a compilation? But was there an aha moment where you're like, oh, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life?
Oh, aha moments. Honestly, I wish I could write, because if I could write a book about aha moments, I would. However, there have been many, but some of my earlier aha moments were so basic and yet so powerful. For example, why assess in lying when the purpose of my being there is to do a seating assessment and intervention? I was blown away, honestly, if you can imagine, by the thought of putting somebody lying down to think about what I needed to know for their sitting solution. I thought originally, if I'm assessing somebody for sitting, this was back in the 80s, then surely I just look at them in sitting. Wow, was that a big aha moment? Mm-hmm. The second aha moment early on was where to put my hand behind the pelvis in the supine assessment when identifying the influence of the lower extremities on the trunk and head, on the pelvis, trunk, and head. And that whole concept of kinetic chain relative to seating. You know, we knew about ranges of motion relative to standing and relative to that function. But the assessment relative to sitting was an entirely different beast, so to speak. And that understanding that was probably the single most important thing I learned relative to the hands-on assessment. The third one would be the way we sleep directly impacts the way we align ourselves in sitting and standing. For example, I always asked about, in conversation with the client or the individual and their carers, what their preferred sleep position might be. But honestly, I didn't do anything about it, and I didn't really join the dots between that sleep position and that sitting position and standing and function position, really, if we want to be thinking about the entire anybody, not just individuals who sit in who function from a wheeled position. I didn't really start joining those dots until the last 10 to 15 years. And now I don't see people for a seating assessment without also thinking about their lying position in bed, because the way we sit is a mirror image almost of the way that we sleep.
Mm. And that's a little tidbit of information to pass along as well.
That has been so influential for me and the service users or the clients that I provide service for. And the fourth piece, and my last aha moment, I thought, how am I going to put all these? So I decided just to go with four. The fourth one is anatomy doesn't lie. And that's a very powerful statement. When we do our due diligence and our hands-on work, we gather the facts from which we can discuss and implement sustainable solutions. So anatomy doesn't lie is a very, very important thought for those clinicians who might be starting on their journey of looking at seating assessments. And why I said that was very important is because I still notice to this day, including as recently as last week, in talking with clinicians, that there's a tendency that when we see postural deviations in a chair, so for example, when we see somebody perhaps sitting with wind sweeping, or we see somebody sitting with their legs in internal rotation and adduction, that our natural tendency might be to say, well, we need something to shift these legs so that they look more optimal in a more society accepted alignment, or the way we think somebody should sit. So maybe we decide to put a big medial thigh support, which was known as a pommel when I first started. We might decide to do that. In other words, looking at technology as a band-aid to the clinical presentation, instead of just acknowledging this is the way the client presents. Thank you. And then in supine, how do we figure out the cause of that clinical presentation? And that was probably, and that is the number one thing where I see clinicians today in all of my mentorship programs and hands-on workshops, where they sit and you can almost see a switch. You can see a light bulb that says, yes, I do find myself doing that because it's a natural instinct. Or the carer might find themselves doing that because it's natural. We see somebody sliding out of a chair, a natural thing is to put things in front, straps, harnesses, etc., because that's a natural instinct. Whereas, in fact, if we do our assessment, we might find ourselves doing something totally different that's a lot more sustainable. So those were my top aha moments.
Yeah, and very good takeaways for us. So let's go to the evidence-based practice. What is the importance of the research, of the evidence-based elements?
Well, in today's clinical world, when I look back at, 30 years ago in comparison to the last 5 to 10 years, for example, the first thing every clinician asks when let's say a manufacturer brings a new product to market or a new idea comes to market, the first thing a clinician or their employer might ask is, well, where's the evidence? In the absence of evidence, people think we shouldn't do anything. Evidence is critically important, and we're so lucky today in comparison to 30 years ago that we actually have research has evolved fantastically. And what we need to also remember is that there's no cookbook and no replacement to clinical expertise. So evidence is a complement to clinical expertise. Clinical expertise is a complement to evidence. But neither one on its own will provide a solution for this client. Examples of some resources we use, and there are a lot, but some examples are the wheelchair provision and the wheelchair provision process from RESNA, the ICF model, the International Classification of Function and Disability from WHO, a clinical research guide to standardized wheelchair seating, measures of the body and seat support surfaces. That's become my it's become my everyday reference. In fact, I keep it open, and whether I'm we've transferred some of the data from that into our own assessment form, but I keep it open every day when I'm talking to clinicians, when I'm thinking about my own clinical solutions, and when I'm doing my assessments, because there's no excuse anymore for us to be talking about a pelvic obliquity or a pelvic rotation or a posterior pelvic tilt without referring to standardized measures that we've been given a gift of. In other words, if I pick up notes that you wrote, Wendy, and you pick up notes from anybody else relative to our assessment, we should all be speaking the same language.
Yes.
And there's no real excuse for us not to anymore. And yet it's amazing around the globe that a lot of clinicians are not even aware, because how would they be, that these standards exist. So I'm a big believer that that guide to wheelchair seat measures is a critical document for us to have if we're in the world of doing postural care or relative to seating assessments.
And any of that information or links, any of that I can share at the end for the viewers, anything that's allowed to be shared, we will, because if you are sitting there thinking, well, I want to do the right thing, I want these things, but I'm just not exposed, maybe we can offer a few at the end. I'll put a slide up.
These are all public documents. They're all available. They're readily easy to upload. So there's no restrictions that way. So absolutely, that's no problem. Relative to skin and skin integrity preservation, I personally lean on the prevention and treatment of pressure injuries, the clinical practice guide, and that's easily available through the NP, the National Pressure Injury Advisory Panel, which is part of a whole global organization. And those guidelines were updated in 2019. And I think it's really important that clinicians take the time to become familiar with those guidelines relative to seating and positioning. Because, for example, in Ireland, they will refer to the Waterlow scale. In North America, we would have referred to the Braden scale, for example. Yes. And now in the new clinical practice guidelines, or newer clinical practice guidelines since 2019, it's well documented within those guidelines that those tools, although they're nice tools, they're really not valid and reliable tools for us to determine the risk level that the individuals we're working with may be at. So I strongly encourage us to become updated with those clinical practice guidelines related to pressure injuries and skin care. And then there's outcome measures, because that's also a big part of the discussion. One of our first webinars in our 2-week online course is related to evidence-based practice and outcome measures. My daughter is my business partner also, and she is a doctor of physiotherapist, a doctor of physical therapy who graduated from Pittsburgh. And now she's here in Ireland with me, doing her own practice, totally unrelated, but also works with me in this area. And of course, I took full advantage of her much newer graduation and much more, I suppose the word would be a much more rounded education, graduating in 2019. So she put together for me the webinar on evidence-based practice and outcome measurement. The outcome measures that we would talk about would be the FMA, would be the functional mobility assessment, and also another one would be the posture and posturability scale. We refer to a lot of different outcome measures. The type of individuals that I tend to work with clinically myself at this point in time, I do consultation, and mostly the individuals that are referred to me are those with extremely complex postural deviations. And a lot of those individuals, it's difficult to apply some of those standardized measures to. So I personally use things like O2 sat levels, sitting tolerance, which may sound a lot simpler, but for those individuals, they're very effective outcome measures to before and after intervention. So those would be the key measures that we look at, and I'm sure there are so many more that we refer to in our education, but those are the top ones I thought I'd hit on for this conversation.
And these are very important for our viewers because it's putting it all in perspective. Okay, I definitely want wonderful outcomes, and these are the steps to do that, but there's different ones based on, like you said, sometimes you have a more complex case, so you can individualize, but there's plenty of standardized assessments to pull from. So I like that.
And relative to the lying down world, we would use mostly the Goldsmith indices of measure for looking at the anatomy and the body structures and function in the various different lying positions. So that would be probably the gold. Yeah, I would say that's the most commonly used benchmark we would use for the lying down position when we're looking at nighttime position.
So you talked about your course. Now I want to shift gears and go to your work and your course, because I think a lot of people are going to want more information on that and finding out as much as they can, but going through the different modules or courses really help with becoming an expert in the field of positioning. So talk to us about your course and the life box, I think you call it.
Yes, the life box is a term that I kind of created for myself so many years ago. And it's, I would share a video that you can share with your audience, but basically we're looking at the points between your ASISs and your lower ribs, and you're looking at the shape of that. And the reason I call it life box is because so much of our life functions, our physiological functions, are affected and housed in this area. Our diaphragm being the roof of our pelvic floor, and our colon, and everything that important to us is in that area. And therefore, our body posture in sitting and lying has a huge impact on these physiological functions. So I just call it the life box. And so it's become a fun term for many clinicians around the globe. I have emails from clinicians from all corners of the world saying, I love your life box. Are you okay if I said, please use it, because if it helps you in clinical practice, that's fantastic. It's also something that I have found that carers really value. For example, if a clinician has done a hands-on assessment and made a recommendation and has come up with a plan for a postural alignment that works for this client in every domain of their function, then all of a sudden, and the new systems provided, everything's good. And then the carers change. Or as we know in life, we have multiple carers in some instances. And we are hoisted. We see a lot of our clients hoisted into their seating system. If that's the case, sometimes when a person is transferred into their seating system, they may not be transferred in a way that allows them to be seated optimally as per what the clinician had originally intended. So a very nice little screen is for a carer to take a little quick look at this life box and ask themselves, do I need to do a little adjustment? Perhaps the transfer wasn't as successful as we intended. And this can be a nice screening tool for carers, the client themselves, clinicians, for everybody. It's very simple. And I will share with you a little video. There's also a blog on our website specifically about the life box.
Yes, and I'll put all of that at the end for people to have as a resource. And if they're watching on demand, they would also have it as a resource. And with your, I kind of went different with the life box. I just wanted to make sure we got that in. But with your course information, we will put up how to contact you. But anything you want to share on the 24-hour postural care related to the course and why it's important?
Yes, and the course is a 2-week online course, and it was born because of the pandemic. Because on March 6th, 2020 in Ireland, everything on our calendar was removed, as most people's around the globe. So all of a sudden, we're still essential workers. There are still clinicians in the field providing services with no ability to go anywhere for face-to-face in-person training. So we put everything that we teach before that, or everything we taught before that, we put that into modules, bite-sized, 1-hour size modules, all the way through from evidence-based practice, anatomy biomechanics related to seating and lying, anatomy at night, hands-on assessment, translating the findings, selecting a seat cushion, back support, etc. So there's 10 modules that an individual can access in their own time, 5 each week, and then a live Q&A with me once a week. So that's the 2-week online course. And also from the pandemic came the concept of what was wild to me. It was my daughter's concept, the virtual mentorship program. There was a recognition that when I was doing seminars, the pandemic gave us an opportunity to think. It forced us to think. Yes. And we recognized on feedback from years of seminars and years of 1-day, 2-day, 3-day events, clinicians always give fantastic feedback. Yes, we love this. We'd like more of this, like less of that. But the number one thing everybody wanted more of was hands-on. And people would leave the seminar, even if you did a few hours of hands-on, and then you'd do a follow-up if you had the privilege of doing that and to get feedback, to learn that really and truly it was exciting, but it wasn't always being implemented every day moving forward. The book got put away at the end of the course. I have years worth of them on my own shelf, and I know what that's like. So the mentorship concept was born. And the idea being that clinicians we started with 10 weeks, and then feedback asked at 1 hour a week, and feedback asked us for shorter time period with more time for each appointment. So now we do a 5-week program, which involves 2-hour weekly meetings, just like we're doing now. Mm-hmm. And the clinician will do, if somebody is feeling like they need to review all their anatomy, we'll do a whole palpation session. If somebody's feeling, because sometimes clinicians share with us that they're not comfortable, putting their hands so intimately under somebody's ITs and under somebody's trochanters. I take it for granted that that's what I do. But there are many clinicians who have never, maybe they've been working in a different area of practice and they're feeling insecure, which is totally reasonable. And the mentorship we found that it gives a safe place for individual And we, in an ideal world, we would love to see more multidisciplinary team members like OT, PT, speech language collaborate together in a safe space like we have now, where we even do virtual assessments with their clients. So I guide them through the hands-on assessment and then the translation of findings, all through this one-on-one interaction over a period of time, so that the skill set can be practiced, and then questions and fears and concerns and successes can be shared in the following week's meeting. So it's been a really tremendous addition to what I offer, and it has surprised me because I didn't think that was possible virtually. My daughter was the champion for that project, and it still goes, and it's still a demanded program. So hopefully it helps those who do it.
And you're building the skill set, yes, but you're also building the comfort level and the confidence that, hey, I can do this. I can help these people. And I think another thing that you said is very important, starting with the anatomy. The anatomy doesn't lie. I'm going to definitely remember that line, because starting there versus just plugging in something like a Band-Aid. I think when you're new to this, having the mentorship and having the course behind you, but putting it right into practice, that's on us. That's on us to take all this valuable information that you have and put it into practice right away so that we can build that confidence and not put the book on the shelf. That would be very sad. I don't want anybody to put the book on the shelf. You talked about lying and sleep posture. Anything else you want to say on that? I know I've asked a lot of questions, but I want to make sure that anything that you wanted to make sure you say, we get to.
But sometimes in the client population group that I serve, so for example, it could be a child with cerebral palsy. It could be a young adult with spina bifida. It could be an adult or an elderly person with dementia. So all ages. And just the recognition for ourselves as clinicians, if we lie down ourselves and on our plinth and we put ourselves into a side lying position, and we ask ourselves, if a little drone was hovering over us right now with an X-ray, what would our trunk look like? What would our spine look like? What would our pelvis look like? And what can we see happening at our hips? If we can just stop and think, and then look at the findings in our assessment and make a realization that they're directly related to the lying position. Sometimes I find individuals with their posture has now become so deviated and there's so much body shape disruption that sometimes focusing on improving that person's nighttime position, or sometimes the bedroom is a sanctuary, and you can find a stop sign as soon as you start to talk about nighttime and sleep and the bedroom. It's a stop sign for many people, and I respect that, because you've spent years working on having sleep. So now here's this therapist trying to suggest a change. That's not always well received, as we can very much respect and anticipate. So I usually ask the question, are there any times in this person's day when they lie down? Usually the answer is yes. There is a golden opportunity for us as clinicians to help the clinician we're working with, or the carer we're working with, and the client we're working with, to understand that making some changes in that nighttime sleep or lying down position is truly where the magic happens. Whereas, we can see change over time, especially in chest distortion and rib and spinal, relationships. Whereas it's more of a slow, progressive, I suppose you could use the word treatment modality, even though I hesitate to say that too loudly, because I don't want people to think that what we're doing is all treatment, because it's not.
Right.
But the recognition that change happens outside the chair, that the chair and the components of seating do not stretch, do not change body structure, ranges of motion relative to each other. They simply respect. And there's a blog I have written about that I'm happy for you to share. It's out there for anybody to read. But that was a very important thing for me to understand about that relationship between the lying down and the sitting. And also the way, because many clinicians will say to me, but Sharon, the client's unwilling to change. Or Sharon, I'm working with this child, but the child's parents really, they just don't want anything to change because there's a perception and a reality for them that their child is moving through the night and it's their only space to have freedom. And that's a very common, it's a kind of like a stop sign.
Yes.
And we have to somehow or another help those families understand that this is not a restraint. There should be no discomfort. But in the absence of doing something, that here will be the consequences. And helping them understand that through perhaps trialing it out with pillows and things that we're all familiar with, soft toys, that's not scary, not even in the bedroom. So I would say in other places where they lie down, where that individual lies down, to take opportunity to try the change there. And for me, those were very important messages that I've learned myself that have helped me a lot, guide others to navigate that relationship between lying down and sitting.
Perfect. And we're going to share a lot of resources at the end. So no worries if you're watching it thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't take all the notes. We're going to share all of that and how to sign up for the course, how to find the blog, all the great information and the assessments that you shared. So I want to know, when you're not at work and doing all these amazing things, what do you do for fun?
Wow. I moved back to Ireland to be closer to family in 2017. And I live in the cottage by the sea on the northwest coast of Ireland. So the ocean is right outside my window. I'm very lucky. I feel very blessed. It's a small little stone cottage in Ireland. And what I love to do in the last few years is I ocean swim. I get in the ocean every day when I'm not traveling for work, all winter, all year round. And this weekend, I had the true gift of a lifetime. My daughters gifted me a retreat, and it was all about self-wellness, self-care, balance, in every way balance. And so I do some yoga. I walk about 8.5 kilometers every day on the beach. And really, life is very simple. I'm either working or enjoying those activities with my husband, who I convinced to try out living in Ireland. So as I tell my friends here, I imported my husband to Ireland.
Yes. That's wonderful. And I like that they gifted you that, because sometimes, we need that little reminder, but it sounds like where you're living and the things that you're trying to do daily, it's important because we need you at your best so that you can help us out here in the world. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insight. This is going to really turn on some light bulbs and really empower and help feed that passion for a lot of our viewers. And there are a lot of clinicians, and we do have carers that watch, and a lot of engineers, and when they're designing things for people. So this is all going to be very beneficial, and I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very, very much, Wendy. It was a true pleasure. And if I can help any clinician in any way to follow the passion and carry the torch for 24-hour posture and mobility, I would be delighted. So thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take some questions next. Have those come in. You can put your questions in the chat box and we'll try to get those answered right away. And then I'm going to pull up that slide right now with all the resources. I know people are on the edge of their seat for that. So thanks again, Sharon.
Thank you.
All right, so this is going to be also part of our on-demand when it comes up, so you'll be able to see everything. But she has a wonderful website with lots of great information. All of these links here will take us to different blogs and lots more information. So she kind of gave us a teaser on a lot of topics, and we can click to find out more. And then some of the assessments that she told us about and outcome measure examples. So we'll have all of that here for you. And also once it becomes on demand on the website, you'll be able to click, learn more, find out more, because I think there was so much shared that I've been doing seating and positioning for many years with many different populations. And there were so many things I'm like, ooh, I love that. Or things that I might have already known. I was thinking, ooh, I needed that reminder. And that would have been such a great way to explain it to a carer or explain it to a family member. So lots of great takeaways, no matter where you are. If you're in the beginning of wanting to be great at seating and positioning postural care, or if you're in the middle like me, or you've been doing this a long time, I think there was something for everybody. And a big thing are the assessments. I think knowing which assessments to pull and knowing that there are different ones. So we definitely wanted to share that. I know a lot of you, I promised that you could find out when you were messaging me through Facebook. You wanted to find out about education with Kalogon and getting some information, or maybe you and your team, and we can definitely set that up. So you can email education@kalogon.com and get that information. And we can set up, as some of you were asking about in-services, and we do those. So I promised you more information on that. So let's go to the questions. Wow, India, Florida's representing. We have people from New York. Thank you so much for joining us, you all. All right. So someone says, loving the stories of both the personal and the professional. This person's been to Ireland. I agree with that.